Hi everyone, I'm Dan Tyler, a producer at Clarion. Just wanted to welcome you all on behalf of Clarion Gaming to the next episode of our sports betting webinar series in the run-up to the widely anticipated ICE North America Conference and Exhibition that's going to be taking place in Boston between the 13th and 15th of May this year. Please keep a lookout for information about the upcoming event that will provide an exciting and unique conference agenda focused on surge in sports betting and other key gaming verticals in the US. Today's webinar will look at how audience engagement can be driven in sports through bettor integrated content creation. I want to thank the speakers for being involved today, and before I hand over to our moderator Dustin Gorka, Head of Content in the US for Catena Media, I want to note that the webinar will be recorded for those who would like to listen or share the session at a later date. We hope the webinar will last around 45 minutes, and for those of you listening live, you can submit questions throughout the session, and if we have time, we'll try to get them answered at the end of the webinar. So thank you again for tuning in. Thank you again to the speakers, and I'll hand over to Dustin.
Thanks, Daniel. Welcome, everyone. I have a great panel of folks here. I'll quickly run through who's here. We're talking about digital audience engagement in sports through better integrated content creation across traditional and digital viewing platforms. So we have a pretty good group of folks for that, I think. Brian Musburger, CEO of the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Aubrey Levy, VP of Marketing and Partnerships for The Score, John Adams, President of the Arena Football League, and Jason Logan, who works for Covers.com. Thanks everyone for being here. And I just wanted to start off with a pretty general icebreaker question. Obviously, in an era of legal sports betting in the United States expanding pretty rapidly, is this a new era for the sports media business in the U.S. as well? On top of that, I assume the answer is going to be yes, but I'll let all of you answer for yourself. Start with Brian.
Yeah, it absolutely is a new era. I think that if you were to break it down, there was the pre-PASPA era, and what we're now in is sort of the PASPA, the ugly limbo stage, sort of heading towards post-PASPA. But there's going to be this difficult period where people are trying to figure out, or we're waiting for the leagues to really go all in on sports gambling content. We're not there yet, but I anticipate within the next 18 months we should be in the post-PASPA era.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, Europe and United States, are probably both saying, okay, we thought the spigot was going to get turned on a lot quicker than it is, and we're obviously a bit fits and starts. We only have online wagering in a few states now, so definitely agree with all that. Toss that off to Aubrey.
Yeah, I think I agree with Brian. I mean, I think there's a general consensus across all facets of the sports media landscape and sports landscape that this is in motion. And I think it's not a quick progression. It's going to take a good amount of time to figure out, and everyone's going to kind of enter it at their own pace. Obviously, certain people are going to dive in much quicker. We've seen a bunch of people get into the operating business right out of the gate last summer, fall in New Jersey. We're obviously taking our own position in it that we're planning for this year. But yeah, I think there's no more perception that this is not a reality. I think everybody's on board with it being a reality now. It's just going to be the slow and gradual shuffle as it works itself out state by state by state.
And how about you, Jason? I know, just talking beforehand, that you've seen a pickup in interest already before we even have a full rollout in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. The appetite has grown for sports betting and sports betting information. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's new. Sports betting has always been there. It's been part of sports culture. It's very much been in the shadows. And it's kind of been up to those mainstream media providers how much light they want to shine on it, how much they want to get into it. I mean, to go back, to speak to Aubrey and go back to the Score TV roots, they were one of the first places to really integrate odds into just about, their tickers and routinely kind of mention odds and stuff like that, which was something you didn't see along, outside of those. I always say it's kind of the three big betting times a year, which is Super Bowl, March Madness, and that Cinco de Mayo Derby weekend. And at that time, the mainstream media was super thirsty to soak up all the sports betting edge and have that different commentary. But then, when those times of year were over, they would tuck sports betting back in the closet and put us back in the shadows type thing. But as the legal markets roll out, that stigma around sports betting is dying off. So while I don't necessarily think it's maybe a new era, I think maybe they're seeing it through a new lens, and it's going to have that acceptance as part of the sports culture, which is the same way that you see it in, say, the UK or Europe. it's nothing new to sports, but it's being looked at definitely through a new lens.
Yeah, to that point, both covers and VSIN both existed before the fall of PASPA. There's obviously a need and a desire for sports betting information in the United States, in Nevada, and elsewhere before it started being legalized everywhere. And John, wrap up with you. Obviously, a little different perspective. We're all kind of on the media side of this. What do you? I mean, what do you? Obviously, the league see a big opportunity in this, and you guys as much as anyone, I think.
Yeah, no, we see it as a huge opportunity, and we certainly fall into the category of those that are going to dive right in. We're in a good position where we're kind of relaunching and restructuring the league, and we've done the bulk of that work over the past year. And so we essentially have a blank canvas to roll out. The league has been around, for 31 years, but it's time to modernize, what the Arena Football League is. And the timing is coming together perfectly as there's technologies focused on how do we keep fans engaged throughout the course of the entire game as we enter an era of shortened attention spans. At the same time, gambling being legalized as being introduced. So kind of all of those things are coming together for us all at the same time. And it really is the perfect modernization of our league. I mean, the history and the foundation of our league is built on, fast-paced, high-scoring, exciting product, as well as, a product that gives more access and engagement to their fans than what a lot of the other leagues do. We've historically had, the games are just close, you're up. It feels like you're on the field sometimes. Balls go into the stands. You get to keep them. The players sign autographs after the games. It's part of our mission statement that the players are engaged in the community, and there's elements built into the CBA around that. So we've always had that access and engagement with our fans historically, and now, with the implementation of technologies and gaming and gambling, it gives us the ability to continue on with that mission with a new vision. So we're really excited about it. We're going head first, and we can't, we're going to be ahead of, kind of waiting for all these states to get legalized to maximize everything. But we're not going to wait for that. We're going to, start that process now.
Yeah, and you have obviously an owner there who's been very high and probably the most vocal of any owner on sports betting, Ted Leonsis. How much is his involvement and his foresight on sports betting kind of help push that forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly his vision, and I'm not sure how familiar with the league you are, but there's essentially two main groups and now running the Arena Football League. It's Ted and the Monumental Sports and Entertainment Group, which, as you mentioned, is all in, right? And the Arena Football League, gives them a platform to execute some of the technologies and vision that Ted has the foresight to see, and partnered with the Trifecta Sports and Entertainment Group, which is where I come from, where we have a history of operating successful Arena Football League franchises and have the background and experience in arena football. So our two groups work really well together. We get along, we share the same vision, and really complement each other's strengths. To make sure that we take advantage of Ted's vision, but do it in a way that's fundamentally and operationally sound with the foundation and of what the product is. So Ted's definitely his vision and resources available at Monumental Sports and relationships are a big part of where we're at today and where we're going. And
we'll push this to Brian next. I think obviously, I think you are, as much as anyone can understand the opportunity that's come along. You started VSIN before PASPA actually fell. There was obviously a market for the business then, and the market has only grown. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's been like pre and post for you guys?
Yeah, and I think that pre-PASPA, in the past, I don't know, I was just actually going through some old notes and an original draft of our business plan, and we were predicting that we were $8 years away from legal sports betting in the United States. It happened a little bit faster than that, but we also saw really a lack of credible content out there for people that were interested in putting a little money on the games. There was most of the sites that had content dedicated to sports gambling. It was folks that were either selling picks or they were or bet taking operators themselves. And I didn't think that you could really trust information coming from some of the offshore operators, that the unregulated operators. So it's changed considerably in the last 18 months. I think everybody's throwing their hat into the ring, but there's still a finite number of people who truly understand the space. Sports betting it's a tough business, and there aren't a lot of people that do it well, and there's even fewer people that are willing to share sort of their secrets of how they do it well. So identifying the right people to as content creators has been one of the big challenges, and I think that's going to get even more difficult now with more people getting into it. There's still just a handful of people that I think truly understand the business and are able to effectively communicate to new bettors how to do it properly.
You've touched on a subject that's near and dear to my heart, offshore betting. The opportunity from legal betting is still fairly small in the United States for now, and will be for at least a few years. But until more states legalize online wagering and retail wagering, do media companies, do all of us here, do we owe it to anyone to support the legal market versus the offshore market? Or should we just be serving the demand that already exists and has in some ways grown since the fall of PASPA? I guess let's start with Aubrey. I think maybe you're best situated to talk about this.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to speak to it. I think from our perspective, it was always paramount for us that we maintained a totally clean profile, right? That we didn't take any money from any questionable gray market, black market books or offshore operators. And it was done in large part because just like Brian said, we foresaw a day when this would open up in the U.S. market. I think, like, our perspective is, yes, we, as a U.S. media company, probably more so than any other existing national sports media companies, because we're becoming an operator, it's hugely paramount that we support the legal market as it rolls out state by state by state. We avoided getting anywhere near dirty pre-PASPA, and we're going to certainly avoid it post-PASPA. And I think there's enough templates, looking at New Jersey, where this is, even though it's a single state, where it's coming into market and it's working, right? There's new bettors coming online. The revenue coming to these sports books is substantial. Now it's only a single state, so in the macro scheme of things, it's not anywhere near the full potential of the market, and there's still a ton of dollars going offshore. But yeah, I think if for no other reason other than the fact that we want to operate, we need to be lily clean. I think, but even beyond that, I think it's better for the market overall. The quicker the U.S. gets to a robust place of legal sports betting where it's regulated above board, the better it is for everybody. So that would be my perspective, and yeah, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, Jason, same question to you. I mean, obviously you guys are mostly better consumer focused, and not certainly nobody's ever being prosecuted for taking wagers online or making wagers online if they're betting on an offshore book versus a legal book. But how much are you guys looking at the legal versus the offshore market, and how you're catering and curating content for the market right now?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I can't say that Covers has not had those relationships in the past, because they did, but once legal crackdowns came down, this is a long time ago. We cut those ties and realized that there's the risk is just too much, and also you could sully your product and sully the content and the information that you're putting out there. Much like Brian alluded to, who do you trust in terms of who's transparent and who's serving themselves or serving advertisers or sponsors or affiliates. We haven't had any contact. We mainly deal with Nevada books right now, and we've gone even steps further to make sure that we're not pushing even odds from offshores and stuff like that. But I really think it comes down to whose agenda, like what is your agenda? Do you want the viewership? Do you want that audience from sports betting? Is that all you're after? Regardless of where the odds come from or your context or your money comes from? Are you just looking to make that buck or bring in that audience? Are you located in a state in which there is legal wagering, and do you fear action from gaming authorities? And then do you have, much like the score, do you have plans to be an operator? Do you have plans on advertising with legal sports? But do you plan on having affiliate deals? All of those will come into play, depending on who you're serving and which markets you're affiliating yourself with. If you're with the legal sports betting market, things will probably be a lot easier to connect the dots to these budding markets. If you're dealing in offshore markets, then you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum right now, right? Because the opportunity in the future is big. Right now, it's kind of small. In the short term, anecdotally, I know that the marketing budgets for offshore books are kind of off the charts. They're spending a lot. They're doing PR efforts. They're doing a lot of that kind of stuff that average Joe on the street heard the Supreme Court struck down the sports betting ban. Now they think, oh, maybe sports betting is just legal everywhere. It's obviously not the case, but like if you just go search sports betting in your search from the U.S. right now, you're gonna get offshore books. You're gonna get Bet Online. You're gonna get Bovada. So it's an interesting conundrum for media in the short term, especially. Brian, I don't know if you have any insight into all this.
Yeah, it was incredibly tempting as a startup when some of these offshore unregulated books would offer 7 figures to promote their operations, and while it was tempting, we were reluctant to never took that money. The last thing, you can flush your credibility down the toilet if you're sending your listeners or viewers to a bet-taking operator who refuses to pay out or closes their doors. It just wasn't worth it to us to ever take that risk, as tempting as it may have been. But I do think that there's an obligation for the leagues and media companies to sort of self-police and come up with some best practices. I think that we should do everything we can to support the legal market and make sure that there's transparency with all of the operators that we work with.
And John, perhaps you'll surprise me, but I'm going to imagine you're going to be all in on a regulated market. You have franchises that are one that's announcing its name today in Atlantic City, where obviously New Jersey, the big new sports betting market. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to say anything too different than what all of our other panelists have already mentioned, but at face value, you could go down the route of taking advantage of eyeballs and viewership any way, shape, or form you can get it. However, that's just not going to be a sustainable model for us, right? If we don't get, a piece of the book, so to speak. So as of now, the way we can monetize this is through corporate partnerships and engaging our fans and finding ways to turn, those numbers into dollars. And if there's a perception that there's a lack of integrity in our game, or there's a lack of integrity with the people that we partner with to execute these elements, then reliable and respectable brands are not going to partner with us, and the fans are going to be turned away if they feel there's a lack of integrity. So it's critical that we partner with the right people that share that vision and passion to make sure that there's integrity in everything that we're doing, or else we're doomed to fail.
This next topic I wanted to get into, everybody here is kind of ahead of the curve on this as far as what is going to happen in media around sports betting as far as content and beyond content. We're seeing a lot more content at national kind of sports sites. We have now a daily show on Fox Sports 1. There's a daily show coming called The Daily Wager on ESPN via ESPN News. So that's the obvious thing. There's going to be more content. Get into a little bit about that. What else are sports betting media companies going to do? Are they going to be so obviously affiliates? And I thought we'd talk to Aubrey a little bit about it. You're actually going to be an operator. For anybody who's not familiar with that, you've partnered to get into New Jersey as a sports betting operator with an online gaming platform. Tell us a little bit about your experience and why you decided to get into being an operator in sports betting.
Yeah, no problem. I think talking from our perspective, the sports betting has always been part of the DNA of us. And I think as Jason beautifully teed up in his earlier response. I mean, we've talked about betting lines in the content that pervades all the way back to when we were a television sports network in Canada. So we've always showed lines. We've always talked sports betting, just literally because that's an authentic part of a sports fan's engagement. Right? I mean, like everyone on this panel knows or has been saying for a long time, to presume that people aren't betting on sports is crazy. They are. It's a known part of their behavior. And finally, we're starting to take the proper steps to accept it, adopt it, regulate it, and build businesses around it in the U.S. So as I said, we've always done it in a way that was totally clean and nowhere near any potential questionable behavior, but we did it because we knew at some point the market would open up. Our perspective and how we've always succeeded as a sports media organization, as an independent sports company up against the guys like ESPN and Turner, was by being hyper-focused on what our fans wanted and delivering them content on the platforms with which they look to consume. It's why we were early into mobile, why we moved early into things like esports and built a robust presence. So when PASPA finally repealed, that was a huge opportunity for us. And to be honest, one that we are very bullish on and taking a very long game on. There was clearly an opportunity to take even just regulated affiliate dollars that are coming in fairly substantially in New Jersey. And people are paying a lot of money for affiliate signups. But our perspective is that to offer the best experience to a sports bettor, the bet needs to be more than just a transaction. And the vast majority of sports books are purely transactional platforms. And these guys are working feverishly to add additional levels of engagement into their platforms. I think their term is bet stimulation, to keep people engaged in betting further. But it doesn't fulfill the underlying sports fans' behavior, which is these are fans having robust sports experiences of which the bet is a component. It is not the exclusive end-all be-all. So our philosophy was, we have a national footprint with millions of users who engage with our app on average over 100 sessions per user per month, so highly engaged. We should offer them the bet, and we should do it in a way that's seamless, integrated, and easy. And in order to do that well, you have to do it yourself. You cannot just kick that user out to a third-party platform and leave it to them to facilitate the transaction. Not even taking to the next step, which is that the U.S. is a totally new market with a lot of new players coming online. And how can you help a new player walk into a betting experience rather than just drop them on a sports book, which is not going to be the most friendly experience for them, right? So for us, the opportunity was just awesome and huge, and the fact that we are a purely mobile-centric sports media organization plays obviously very well for the future of sports betting with the growth of InPlay. So it was a lot of work and thought into how we enter the market, but once we found our partners in New Jersey, our market access partner with Monmouth, and we found the right technology partner with Betworks, it was a pretty clear path. There was not a lot of hand-wringing about should we be taking affiliate dollars. For us, it was we should operate, we can operate, and we can very excitedly be the first media company in the U.S. to be an operating sports book.
And I'll preface this by saying you did not pay me to say this, but I really love your app. I actually use it as my main sports app.
Thank you very much.
So
thank you.
I'll take a chat after the panel, but.
I appreciate it. And the one thing I'll say, which goes to the thing for this panel, but like since PASPA repealed, obviously there's been a rush of content creation, right? Which is, to your point, Dustin, how most media companies are going to start to put their toes in the water. The biggest thing there's an authenticity and a way to deliver content to a sports bettor that takes a lot of nuance and know-how, right? And you could put up a 30-minute show on broadcast and kind of brute force it out to your audience. But I think there's there's just like with linear now, how we're seeing sports rights getting fragmented all over the place and consumption going all over the place. There's a lot to be said for being nuanced and focusing on what your user is asking you for, the platform they're asking for it on, and really focusing on that product experience.
One more for you before we move on, Arby. Just curious, what kind of conversion do you think you're going to get out of that? Obviously, if you guys have a lot of success in taking just general sports fans who are interested in sports betting information already, taking them to your sports book and placing bets, and then they go back for more news, more your scores, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm just curious if you have any sense of what you think you're going to be able to do as far as that. Like you said, you have, I think last report, more than 4 million monthly active users, lots of sessions, like you said. What do you see the opportunity as? How big is the opportunity?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think fully bullishly that going into this U.S. market, we as an operator, we are better positioned than anybody because we have the engagement already, and we're just going to be layering in and adding on the bet to those users. We know from our user base that we profile incredibly high to sports bettors compared to other media channels. So just proxying what existing sports books in New Jersey did throughout this first football season into now March, I think it's incredibly exciting and compelling. Without going into what we think we're going to actually convert in a number perspective, I don't think anybody's got a better primed user base from a media perspective up against our big competitors to actually convert those users and drive them over, because we know our users are already betting. We know they're bettors. We know if a user's hammering a box score when the game's a blowout, but the line's in question, you know that user has got action, right? There's a lot of really nuanced ways you can speak to your users because of the media engagement that we've got, that I think is going to allow us to do so much cool stuff and such a differentiated product offering.
I'll toss this out to the rest of the folks. Obviously, we're going to have more shows, more content, more podcasts, all of that as things go on. What else what other content should we be seeing, or would you like to see, or are you guys even planning in the future? Start with maybe Brian.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we actually started to work with the Arena League on last season was the idea of bet casting, where you're doing a broadcast of the game that is a complement to the primary broadcast feed that's speaking directly to the sports bettor. I think you're going to see a lot more of that, and the Arena League has been way ahead of the curve on supporting that kind of content. Last year, we were doing live look-ins where they would go from the primary broadcast and go to our update studio in Las Vegas, where we would talk about the dynamic in-game lines. And I think that was a bold step for a league to take. I think that most leagues will probably continue to have that primary feed remain free of a lot of overt betting talk, but you will find secondary feeds, betcasts, dedicated to both the in-game markets and just talking directly to sports bettors. It's a different kind of commentary, and I think a really exciting way to follow a game. We did an experiment this weekend with NASCAR and did the Pennzoil 400, tracking that, and did a broadcast of the race just through the eyes of people that had action on the race. And it really was a very different broadcast from what you would see on Fox or NBC. And I think we're excited to explore what more can be done in that area as in-game wagering continues to grow.
Yeah, I think we saw it was the Wizards and an NBC regional network actually did one of these betcasts that you're talking about as well, as an experiment to see how it goes. If there are supposed to be more of those. So, yeah, I guess I'll toss to John. What do you see? Is that second screen experience or alternate feed experience something that you see having legs for you guys or for other leagues?
Well, obviously the answer is yes, and Brian and the folks there have been a phenomenal partner as we work together to integrate these kinds of things into our broadcast and into our games. I mean, I think in general, the Arena Football League lends itself to gamifying the entire game pretty naturally, right? I mean, it's a sport that has a lot of scoring. There's scoring play every 6 to 8 plays. So you don't have to get overly creative to come up with what the data points are and what the betting opportunities are throughout the course of the game. So that's where we want to go. We want to gamify the entire game experience, and initially it might be more who's going to catch the next touchdown pass, what's going to happen on this drive, and 12 to 14 moments just as we work on some of the delay issues. But ultimately, can we gamify every single play of the game? That would be the ideal experience for us. And I think it all just then ties in together with where the world is today, right? They need the short attention spans. People need to be engaged constantly to remain focused on one thing. And as we tie all of these things together, gaming and gambling integrated into the game itself and as frequently as possible keeps people engaged throughout the course of the entire game. And then if we can complement that with the folks with Brian and his crew, now we can provide them the information that they need to stay engaged and make educated bets throughout the course of the game. So it all works together for us. And on top of our product itself being fast-paced and constantly moving, we're indoors. So we have, there's no weather. There's, connectivity isn't the issue that there are in outdoor venues and big venues where weather gets into play. And it's football, and people love football, and that's the #1 betting sport in the world. So tie everything together. We're pretty excited about having everything come together in one unit and rolling it out there and being disruptors in the industry.
Jason, toss this one to you. What do you see as the future for sports betting content? And tell me a little bit. And we talked before the panel here about what your experience is and kind of the hyper local video content you're doing about betting.
Yeah, so Covers is part of Tribune Media, which has a lot of local focused channels. And in terms of the betting interest for those particular channels, it's always on the local level. That's their focus. They want to serve local news. And when you're talking sports betting, it's just another different way or a different layer to their local sports coverage. So I've done regular TV spots with, say, WPIX in New York. We just talk Giants and Jets. WGN in New Orleans, they want to talk Saints. They want to talk LSU. With like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they want to talk Penn State, and then they'll talk, Eagles, and they'll talk Steelers and things like that. San Diego, with the new AAF team there, they're interested to talk about them, and also too with Manny Machado signing with the Padres, they had a lot of interest around that. So I think from a local level, at least from my experience, is that it is that hyper-focused local stuff. They do want to talk about big events. Super Bowl obviously is something that's all-encompassing, no matter where you're at. Things like the Oscars too are kind of fun, and obviously with New Jersey having the first legal Oscars betting markets this year, that was quite exciting. But that's what I'm seeing is broadcasters built on local focus. They want that extra layer of sports betting focus, and especially if you're in a state where there is legal wagering, then the tie-ins there are kind of endless in terms of if stations are looking for advertising for sponsorship. I did some Super Bowl preview shows, Week 1 preview shows, sponsored by operators through these TV stations. So I think it's people want to bet the home team. They want to bet their favorite team. It's the reason you saw like MGM books had liability on the Jets to win the Super Bowl this year, where they would never have that before. But it's because everyone in Jersey wanted to bet the Jets. They wanted to bet the home team. So I think that focus on local and favorite teams is a big way to reach your audience.
We'll stick with you here, Jason. We want to talk about in-play betting. If you're coming to us from Europe, you'll look at us like aliens, but in-play betting is pretty new here. Nevada has had in-game betting, but I wouldn't call it necessarily a robust product. In New Jersey, we've seen early days a lot more robust kind of in-play product where you can quickly bet on a lot of stuff. One of the most interesting things to me that I've heard, FanDuel, owned by Paddy Power Betfair, has actually had streaming for the Australian Open baked into its app, and they said they saw a huge amount of engagement out of that, which is, Australian Open, not a huge event over here in the U.S. except for diehard bettors and sports betting and tennis fans. So, what is the opportunity for InPlay in the U.S. And just talk a little bit about that, maybe, Jason, and what you see moving forward.
Sure. Well, I mean, live betting, I'm a massive fan of live betting. I love it. More because I have small kids, and generally they're going to bed at exactly when games tip off. So I'm not able to sit down in front of the television until midway through the first quarter, and then I can get in on whatever game I'm watching. But it's great for that inclusion, no matter whatever it is you're tuning into. I'm sure anyone on this panel that has bet, or anyone listening that has bet, they've sat down at a bar or at home, flipped on the TV, and then jumped into the live betting market simply because the TV's there. But it's really only going to go as fast as the technology allows it. And especially with the way that the cord cutting trend is here, the streaming services, there's a lag, there is a gap between the on-field events and what the audience sees. Live betting does work better with football and baseball, things that are a little slower paced, where odds can come out, there's time in between plays. The odds can go up, the odds can come down, and then reset. But then also, too, I mean, the methods of translating on-field events right now to the sports books and having them adjust their odds, that's never been faster. But the problem is now it's that lag time between the audience seeing what happens on the field and getting their live bet in. I think that needs to catch up. It's almost like almost an unfair market in terms of those that are, say, streaming a game. And then, say, watching through a cable provider, which is a little quicker, or even those live in attendance. It's the technology has to catch up in terms of the streaming and how people are viewing the games. That's my biggest take on it.
It actually dovetails into a question we got. I'll read this to all of you and let you weigh in from Jed. Much of today's streaming technology is built with too much latency or delay. So how are you going to handle in-game best when users are too far behind the action on the field and out of sync with each other? Aubrey, I don't know if you have any plans or any insight into this, but yeah, it is obviously a problem. European operators have been doing this, but are we going to be there in the United States, or do you have any plans to do that in your sports betting aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, look, without getting into feature set for the upcoming product that we're going to be rolling out, I mean, one of our core competencies to date has been the fastest delivery of data to our user base, yeah, there is, I think, a lot that has to happen and will be happening rapidly in the U.S. market now that we're live. Latency being one of the huge concerns. So I think it's a question that everybody's wrangling with, not just the streaming providers, the data providers, everybody, about what is the quickest and most accurate way to get those markets set. And it's an evolving question, but I think the long and short of it is our responsibility as we're offering InPlay to make sure that we're protected, we're not putting lines in market that we're going to get punished for, but at the same time making sure that the lines are in market in its fast and actionable enough way for our audience. Because if they're not, then that's just another feature where another reason to lose our audience, right? Another reason to lose our bettors to offshore providers.
Yeah. Brian, this has been one of the big touch points in the United States is quote unquote official data. Nevada has obviously been doing this for a long time, but without the official data, as our offshore books, how important is having that stream of data, having if we're going to have a live stream, can we do that? And again, we're probably I think we probably sound like aliens to Europe, but this is all new to us, and sometimes we have European operators, sometimes we have stateside based. So what do you see in all of this?
I think the real motivator and pain for the data will be the speed at which you can receive it. I think that's far more important than official data. As long as there's something that's agreed upon by the sports books, I don't know. That's a separate discussion. But I really think that the thing that's worth paying for in data is the speed at which you can receive it to allow people to have most up-to-date data to use to make informed wagers. But it's an interesting, I think latency is a huge issue, and I think that will be the thing that people will pay for with these broadcast rights is a way to get early feeds that allow them to sync up their betcasts with the games. That's been our big challenge with the broadcasts that we do, where sometimes our commentators are talking about a game that they're seeing 7 seconds after an event has happened, and then we're pushing out a signal through, if it's Sirius XM, that can add another 7 to 10 seconds before the consumer is receiving the signal, even more if they're doing it through the Sirius XM app. So it is a challenge, but I think that's something that I see that changing here quickly.
Yeah, and you can even add seconds onto that. I use Sling, and the latency can be even worse when you're a cord cutter trying to watch live sports. So yeah, I think it's a problem that needs to be addressed certainly across the board in the U.S. Going back to Europe a little bit, I know we're all stateside here, but I think we're probably all aware that advertising for sports betting has gone overboard or been ubiquitous at times. Is there a danger of that in the U.S.? Is there something that we should be learning from the experience in Europe or trying to avoid, or are we just okay with kind of having a free-for-all over here? Start maybe, I don't know, John.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's the same issue with all sports sponsorship, right? I think it's striking the right balance, and it's going to be the same issue as we go into the gamification of things. But even at our games or on our current broadcasters, walking that fine line of making sure we have enough sponsor opportunities to deliver revenue. But obviously, if we oversaturate it, then we're just cluttering up the game, making it less attractive for fans to watch the game, and ultimately under delivering to our partners. So I think it's the same issue with sports sponsorship that's existed forever. Is every team and every partnership has got to come up with that balance, and ultimately striking that balance is going to be a critical decision, for the leagues and teams and operators. So. Yeah, I think that's the issue. Everyone's going to come up with their own, and eventually there'll be best practices and making sure we strike the right amount of balance.
Aubrey, do you have a $1 billion marketing budget that you're gonna deploy on New York and Philadelphia?
That's a very quick no. And even if I did, I'm not sure I would deploy. I mean, look, the U.S. is guilty. Looking back to the days of daily fantasy, I mean, that was. We were guilty, the U.S. market, of insensitivity or an oversaturation of advertising back then, right? And when you look at what's developed in the UK market, I mean, there's very robust gaming platforms, but there's also a lack of customer loyalty. People jump to platform to platform to platform depending on what offers being put in front of them. There's the product differentiation isn't that strong. I think, especially in the U.S. market, it's important to convey value not just through brute force marketing, not just through the loudest or most prominent TV spot or penetration. I think you'll have to prove more value. It's certainly our philosophy. And yeah, even if I had that $1 billion flex in marketing budget, it'd still be strategic with how we're allocating it. I mean, the sole and primary reason we're getting into the game because we have an engaged user base already. If we didn't have the Score media app with our millions of users, I don't think we would be coming in to compete on the operating side. So I think our approach is certainly going to be more sensitive to trying to prove value for our users other than through traditional advertising means. Though, we will engage certainly with certain advertising initiatives. But yeah, there's got to be other ways to show value. I think we're going to all have to do that in the U.S. market.
Brian, obviously you're not quite the same. You guys have a betting centric content already, but what do you see as the larger problem and issue with wider distribution of advertising in the United States?
Well, I think a lot of people learned from the drunken sailor approach of the DraftKings FanDuel days, and I think that you're going to see a lot. People are going to advertise more responsibly than they did in the past, and that's a good thing. Look, I think that the way those two companies went at it brought a lot of scrutiny to the industry and probably ended up hurting their platforms. But I think that a lot of the companies have wised up and are going to look for greater value and more creative advertising solutions that lead to higher levels of engagement.
Jason, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I've been with Cover since 2005, so I've seen the explosion of online gambling. I've seen the ups and downs of it all. And so for about 13 years, I've been waiting for sports betting, and us at Covers, we've been waiting for sports betting to kind of climb out of the shadows and drop the stigma that's around it. And with the repeal of PASPA, I almost see that as a gift, and I feel like it has to be protected. I think it has to be. There's a certain level of education and responsibility that goes along with the type of content that we're providing. But I think that level of responsibility falls on the sports books. I think it falls on the state gaming control, wherever that state may be and whoever is running that. I think it's, like I said, content producers like Covers. And I think with broadcasters too and TV stations, I think there's going to be a particular level of education and responsibility to make sure that problem gambling doesn't become a big thing, and that much like the rest of the panel alluded to, that the market isn't hurt by just an oversaturation of advertising. That really, I mean, if you look at some of that DFS stuff early on, it almost looked like they were giving away money, and they didn't really dig into what it was to play daily fantasy. So there is an educational standpoint to everything, any of the advertising or marketing or these introductions into sports betting.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear everybody thinks we've learned from the DraftKings and FanDuel ad blitz, which I'm sure if you're in the United States and watched football, you probably remember. I'll be interested to see if that's true. Right now, it's kind of targeted. I know anecdotally there's a pretty big marketing spend in New Jersey by some of the operators. You go on public transportation, you're probably seeing Will Hill or DraftKings ads. Radio and local TV, I think they've been pretty aggressive. Part of the reason you're not going to see it is just on a national basis is because there's no tipping point yet. We're still at 8 states with any form of legal wagering, online wagering only in Nevada and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, hopefully coming online this summer. West Virginia has one betting app that's live. So there's not really a national opportunity yet. So it'll be interesting to see, when that tipping point comes, are we going to be flooded with that? So be interested to see that in the future. Got another question here. Figured I'd address probably more in my wheelhouse than anybody's. I haven't heard anyone talk about the role of state-sponsored lotteries in sports betting. Does anyone have any thoughts on the role of lotteries in future gaming? From my perspective, I can tell you lotteries are pretty interested in it. They're always looking to grow their business in the United States. Lotteries are part of a varied gaming landscape. Sometimes they're the main operator and kind of are the gatekeeper for how gaming goes down. Sometimes casinos and racetracks and others are kind of the ones who have have the power in the state. So I see, we already see it in Delaware and Rhode Island. Those are lottery based. I think I just saw a story in Massachusetts where the lottery would like to do sports wagering itself rather than hand it to the commercial casinos there. So I don't know. As far as I don't know if it really ties into the content part of things, other than I would say a market that's a monopoly for a lottery is not the best practice. It's going to probably limit how much revenue there is and how much opportunity there is. Obviously, monopoly is not the best thing in anything, I don't think. But I saw that question and thought I'd answer it. Let's see, what else do we have before we wrap up here? If you have another question we just had on our agenda here, how can sports broadcasters compete with multiple platforms, matching the ever-growing choice for consumers fueled by esports, social networks, and streaming services? What do we see as we're seeing the big boys in sports look at sports betting as an opportunity. How much do they have to do to compete? How much should they be doing? I guess Brian, maybe.
Well, I still think that they're going to wait for the majority of states to offer legal sports betting before they truly move all in. But then it's an interesting dilemma. I think that it will largely be dictated by the leagues. I think that some of the leagues who are looking to build audience and build a fan base will be quicker to embrace gambling. I think that we're seeing it with, I think, the Arena League. I think the AAF came out of the gate and did some very smart things to boost gambling around their product, around their kickoff, and we saw it with NASCAR. But football, with the NFL, with the NBA, it'll be interesting to see what they're willing to do on their national broadcasts. I suspect that they're going to want to keep those primary broadcasts relatively clean from just inundating people with sports betting talk. I think that you still have kids and a growing fan base that are tuning in, and I think the leagues will be uncomfortable turning those primary broadcasts into a discussion of how to bet. So I think that you'll look to secondary platforms, whether it's ESPN News, FS1 or 2. I think those will be the places where you're going to see a lot of growth in sports betting, betcasting, broadcasts, where I think that you'll see multiple feeds covering the same matchup, and it'll be an interesting time.
John, he talked a lot about the AAF. Do you agree with all of that from a league perspective?
Yeah, I think as Brian mentioned, right, for us it's an opportunity to grow our fan base, and as we relaunched the league, have something new and unique to do that with, right? Where our teams aren't receiving a $350 million check every year for the broadcast rights that could possibly be put in jeopardy if it rubs people the wrong way. We're a blank slate, relaunching the league, and we can come out of this as innovators and people that set the tone for what this could possibly look like. We might be in a different perspective if we had the base that the NFL has. So we can certainly understand why they're going to be a little more conservative, and naturally we have the opportunity to be a little more aggressive.
Anybody, Jason, maybe from your perspective, what do you see? What new content should be engaging bettors and sports fans? What's the line between too much and not enough?
Yeah, that's the tough thing, because it still is. I mean, working with covers for so long, you're just entrenched in sports betting, and that's the way you view sports. It's tough to read a headline or see an alert or something like that and not think about how it impacts the spread. But I think it has to be a soft sell. You can't just hit people over the head with too much betting strategy or in-depth statistics and getting into the weeds too much. I almost think you have to take maybe to follow the footsteps of fantasy football in the way that we saw fantasy football roll out. It was just kind of sprinkled into pregame shows, sprinkled into broadcasts a little bit. Not too in depth, getting people's feet wet with it there. And then as the popularity grows and grows, then you'll see guys, you'll see people like Matthew Berry, who built his career around fantasy. You'll see the sports betting Matthew Berry out there. You'll see shows dedicated to that. And then whether that's, on main, the main broadcasting platforms, or maybe it's like second level kind of companion content. Maybe it's something that they feed through a second device. One thing that I've noticed is, people watch sports with their phone in their hand. So I think there's a lot of companion pieces there, companion content that could go along that, if you are someone that is watching the game, you have the broadcast, but then you also have a secondary screen that is serving you the sports betting content that you want. So it's, but at first I would see it, kind of sprinkled in a little bit and very high level.
And again, I agree with you that it's you're seeing it already more. Bryce Harper signed with the Phillies, and I think you're seeing more of, here's what the odds changes are just on social media and content about that. That's the kind of, we're already moving into that world where I think it's a little more prominent. Again, we're all a little bit in the bubble. We're looking at betting content a lot more, but I think I've seen it more mainstream for sure. And Aubrey, you guys already push out. You have spread alerts and total alerts along with your push alerts when you're following a game. You already see this a little bit on your end, and probably will be doing more of it, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm fully expecting that every mainstream sports media organization is going to proliferate content around sports betting. how quickly they do it, who knows? But they're, like, as everyone's already discussed, they're certainly announcing of not producing already. For me, it's more of a question about anybody can produce content, right? Anybody could program a talk show or put up a podcast, set up a studio. Content production is cheaper and easier than it's ever been. It's more of a function of how in tune and sensitive are you to what content your audience is actually asking for, and how are you delivering it to them, and what platform are you delivering it on, and how, right? There's a lot of kind of like with advertising. You could brute force content to into market and pump it through existing channels. That doesn't mean it'll perform, right? Look at the rise of how sports content is consumed via social channels now. Everybody pushes social content, but there's a nuance and authenticity to what actually engages and performs and what doesn't. The same with esports. A lot of media organizations have put their toes in the water on that too. A lot of them have found most of it falls entirely flat, right? Self-promoting a little bit. We've been able to find a lot of success with it, but we did it because we catered to that audience on platforms where that audience was asking for it in ways that audience was looking to consume, and not just formats that had worked for us on the sports side. In fact, what we saw was formats that had worked on the sports side for esports coverage, flat didn't work, right? So we have some experience and competency in speaking to our user base, users who care about betting versus users who don't, right? So you have to do that tricky dance of identifying who your audience is, where they're looking to consume it, and what kind of content they want. We're going to see a lot of talking head programming pop up over the next few years. I question how much of it's actually going to find substantial audience.
Yeah, I hope we don't need more sports betting touts here in the United States. There's already a lot of those, so we'll see where that goes. I think that's as good in place as any to wrap up. We're nearing our hour limit here. I want to thank the panelists and everybody who tuned in. And again, come to the IC event in May if you're able. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.